Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Matt Pearce, Executive Director at the Australian Chamber of Commerce in South Korea. AustCham Korea and the ANZCCJ are pleased to welcome you to a special online briefing, South Australia Hydrogen Export Opportunities. In exploring new opportunities for a stronger collaboration between South Australia, South Korea and Japan, this hydrogen-themed session will feature an update from senior representatives from the South Australian Government and KPMG as to provide an overview of the government's new hydrogen export modelling tool. As a key measure under South Australia's Hydrogen Action Plan, released by the South Australian Government in September 2019, $1.25 million was committed to completing a hydrogen export pre-feasibility study and produced an online modelling tool and prospectus. To get a better understanding on the modelling tool and subsequent investment opportunities in South Australia, today we're joined by Richard Day, Director, Strategy, Policy and Communications Growth and Low Carbon Division for the Department of Energy and Mining, and the team at KPMG Australia, and Edit Mucsi, Business Development Manager for the Department of Trade and Investment. Additionally, we'll be hosting a short Q&A session at the end of today's event. Now, to open today's event, we have a short welcome message from the South Australia's Minister for Trade and Investment, Minister Stephen Patterson. Welcome.
Clean, green or pure energy, it really doesn't matter what you call it. South Australia is a renewable energy powerhouse. As we pioneer our way to a more sustainable future, there's plenty of room to grow. With 2 world-leading home battery schemes, 21 wind farms, 3 utility-scale solar farms, and the world's leading lithium-ion battery at the Hornsdale Power Reserve, our track record of policy certainty supports renewable energy investment. Last financial year, we generated more than half our electricity from renewables, but we have bigger goals in our sights. We're planning to halve net emissions by 2030 and eliminate them by 2050 through decarbonising transportation and engineering new approaches to managing demand. In fact, we're set to become the nation's leader in the uptake of electric vehicles and smart charging stations by 2025. And we're well on the way to becoming a world-class supplier of clean hydrogen, starting with Australia's largest electrolyser coming online in 2020. South Australia can help meet the world's clean energy demands while reducing emissions at home and abroad. Learn more about our investment in a cleaner future by visiting our website.
Now, to kick off today's session, I would like to now welcome Richard Day, the Director of Strategy, Policy and Communications Growth and Low Carbon Division for the Department of Energy and Mining, who provides some opening remarks on the need for the hydrogen export modelling tool. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you, Rowan. Firstly, congratulations to both chambers for partnering to host this event. I have had the privilege of attending events in the past, both in Seoul and in Tokyo, that both chambers have run, and I know you do a great job in bringing people together. So fantastic to see you working together. So yeah, big congratulations to Rowan and Emily and Sally and their team and your colleagues for making this event happen. I guess today we're here to explore hydrogen export opportunities from South Australia. I think, as we all know, there is a huge amount happening in hydrogen around the world, and the amount of momentum that has been built over the last few years is incredible. And obviously, both Japan and Korea have shown tremendous leadership in the move to a hydrogen economy. Pleasingly, Australia is catching up fast. And I guess, as you'll see shortly, there's a whole range of hydrogen strategies, plans and roadmaps and reports that have been released over the last few years. I guess proud to say in South Australia, we kind of got the ball rolling in 2017 with the release of a hydrogen roadmap for South Australia and the release of our green hydrogen study. The Australia's Renewable Energy Agency have looked at Australia's hydrogen export opportunities, and then we've started to see various other states' strategies emerge, as well as the Commonwealth, the CSIRO's hydrogen roadmap. So Queensland, Western Australia, South Australia released our hydrogen action plan in 2019, and then we saw the Australia's national hydrogen strategy released in 2019. And I guess it's important to note that was agreed by energy ministers from all 9 Australian jurisdictions, so each state and territory energy minister as well as the Commonwealth Energy Minister. Tasmania, Northern Territory, Victoria have also all released their own hydrogen strategy or action plan, and New South Wales is developing theirs at the moment. So huge amount happening across Australia. And I think Japan and South Korea are natural partners with Australia when it comes to building the hydrogen economy. And I think we think particularly so with South Australia. I just thought I've had a colleague pull these maps together just as a point of interest. This shows the wind resource comparison between South Australia, South Korea and Japan. As you can see, the darker reds basically mean higher average wind speed, and the blues reflect lower wind speed. And I guess you can see in terms of onshore wind opportunities, the large amounts of wind resources across South Australia. I guess the contrast is even more stark when it comes to solar resources. You can see again the darker red colour where the solar radiation is at its strongest, and the blue where it's least strong. And again, you can see large amounts of South Australia with very large amounts of solar resources available. And it's really in a world where wind and solar are now the cheapest, newest form of generation. I think that's really where we see South Australia. That's really where our strong interest in hydrogen began in 2016. I think suffice to say, South Australia is very, very excited about hydrogen, and as it has been for the last 5 years, and really around the industrial scale production of hydrogen for high volume uses, including export. And I guess what we know, this is a chart from the CSIRO's National Hydrogen Roadmap. It's showing the different factors that impact the levelised cost of green hydrogen from electrolyzers. And I guess really the key message to take away there is that really the secret, if you like, to low-cost green hydrogen is low-cost electricity going into the electrolyzer, as well as a very high capacity factor. And I think that will become more apparent as my colleagues from KPMG talk to the results of South Australia's hydrogen export modelling tool. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I had the privilege to host an ambassador, Japan's ambassador to Australia in South Australia. We've previously also had the privilege of hosting South Korea's ambassador to Australia. And often the question that we get asked is, why South Australia? In the context that every other Australian jurisdiction has some sort of hydrogen strategy or roadmap, we do get asked why South Australia. And so I've really framed up my opening remarks today to be able to answer that question. I think we will be able to make these slides available after the event, so in case anyone is wondering. So really 4 probably key reasons. So as you'll hear, South Australia is a leader in terms of the energy system transformation to clean energy. It's really coming down to the wind and solar resources and the high level of update to date that really provides that competitive advantage in green hydrogen production. South Australia is also home to an emerging large-scale onshore blue hydrogen opportunity, which is being pursued in the Cooper Basin in the northeast of the state. We've got a strong, we have a clear demonstration of bipartisan support from governments from both sides of politics for developing the hydrogen economy, and a track record of delivering tangible actions on hydrogen, including South Australia's hydrogen export modelling tool, which we are here to explore today. So South Australia really is a window to the future for energy transformation. And to put this into some perspective, in less than 15 years, South Australia has gone from 1% renewables to 56% renewables. And that number is still rapidly increasing. If we were a country, this shows percentage share of variable renewable energy generation in different countries. If South Australia was a nation in its own right, we would be second in the world, only behind Denmark, in terms of that percentage share of variable renewables. But we are on a trajectory, we think, in terms of achieving net 100% renewables by 2030. The South Australian government, that is a target for the South Australian government, as is a 50% reduction in the state's greenhouse emissions by 2030, on the way to zero net emissions by 2050. And we also think that by 2050, we could be achieving a level of renewable energy that is more than 5 times current electricity demand, so 500% renewables. And we think by decarbonising transport, by decarbonising the gas networks, exporting zero carbon products and exporting hydrogen will be some of the things that we can do to achieve that sort of level of renewable energy output. Just in terms of a little bit of context for South Australia from an electricity system perspective, South Australia is at the western end of Australia's national electricity market, which has electricity infrastructure across Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, and South Australia. At the South Australian end, we're a very long and stringy network. We're about 1 million square kilometres and a population of about 1.7 million people. We have very limited interconnection to other states at the moment, with one main interconnector to Victoria. A lot of our electricity infrastructure is ageing and old. We have very variable demand for electricity. We have no nuclear, no large-scale hydroelectricity generation, and we are a completely privatised market, so there's no government ownership of the electricity system, and completely disaggregated, which means that electricity generation businesses are different from electricity transmission, electricity distribution, and electricity retail. As I said, this is a slide where I've overlain those sort of solar and wind resources maps that I showed earlier, and really the areas in yellow are where the strongest solar is, the areas in blue which are suitable for wind farm developments, and where they overlap is where you get that coincidental wind and solar, and that's shown in green. And I guess what it shows is, large parts of South Australia, southwest Western Australia, and parts of northern Queensland have that benefit of that complementary and coincidental wind and solar resources, which allow us to produce green hydrogen at high utilisation rates in electrolyzers. This paints a picture on one slide of South Australia's electricity transformation over the last 15 years. What it shows is the amount of electricity generated every month in South Australia by the fuel type. Now, the orange bars are showing gas-fired electricity generation. The black is coal-fired generation, green is wind, yellow is solar, and purple is either imports or exports over the state's interconnector with Victoria. And what you can see is in 2005 on the left-hand side is the state was predominantly a coal, gas, and net importer of electricity. You can see in 2016 the coal-fired generation finished in South Australia, and so if you fast forward through to today, on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that the state is predominantly a solar, wind, gas generation system and a net exporter of electricity. So a really rapid transformation over 15 years. And I guess if you look at the trend, you can see it's unsurprising that the state is on a trajectory for net 100% renewables by 2030. A big part of the current growth is in rooftop solar PV. This chart shows the amount of rooftop solar PV in terms of megawatt capacity installed every month in South Australia since 2007. You can see, I guess, particularly since 2017, that sort of steady growth in the amount of rooftop solar PV being installed in South Australia, and particularly the growth in larger systems for commercial and industrial businesses, which are shown in the green and the red bands there. Here is a a quick snapshot of what a week in South Australia's electricity system looks like. So this is showing the the load profile across a week in spring of last year, as well as the generation of electricity that was used to supply that demand. So again, the yellow areas are solar electricity generation, green is wind, orange is gas generation, purple is imports from the interconnector, and you can even see a little bits of crests of blue, which are the big batteries in the state discharging. And you can see that across that particular week, at certain times of the week, South Australia's electricity was 100% supplied by wind. At other times, it was almost 100% supplied by gas and imports. And then on Sunday, the 11th of October, it was almost 100% supplied by solar. So you can see across a week, just the different extremes that we see in our system. And I think for the month of September last year, South Australia was at 73% renewables for that particular month. As mentioned, as the Minister mentioned in his video, we've about 21 wind farms built at the moment, 3 utility scale solar farms, a number of big batteries. So there's around $5 billion worth of large scale projects in operation in South Australia, but there is a pipeline of $20 billion worth of wind, solar, storage projects in the state. And around $14 billion of this pipeline has already had development approval received. So there's a tremendous opportunity to generate more renewable electricity in South Australia. But as a state, what we're really looking for now is new energy intensive loads that we can introduce to the state to be able to unlock the value of those renewables. And so some of the opportunities that we are pursuing is the electrification of domestic transport through either battery or fuel cell vehicles, decarbonisation of the gas networks, exporting power interstate, and excitingly for me, growing and attractive energy intensive industries for export. So that's where we start to get interested in hydrogen export, chemical production, green mining, green steel, green copper, so green minerals processing, desalination, and even data centres and data processing. So these are the sorts of opportunities that South Australia is actively pursuing. So as I said, really, so the first reason is really around the renewable resources, the level of uptake and the competitive advantage that provides for green hydrogen. As I mentioned, what's emerged over the last 12 to 18 months is an emerging large-scale onshore blue hydrogen opportunity. So as I said, in the northeast of the state is we have the Cooper Basin. It's a major gas production field, and a number of companies are extracting and supplying gas from that basin, including Santos. And Santos are actively pursuing a carbon capture and underground storage opportunity, which will allow them in the first stage to offset all of their greenhouse gas emissions in the Cooper Basin, about 1.7 million tonnes per annum. But they, over time, expect to go beyond that and be able to become a producer of blue hydrogen from that area for export. Third reason, as I mentioned before, is bipartisan support for developing the hydrogen economy. So as I mentioned, since 2017, South Australia released its hydrogen roadmap, and in 2019 released its hydrogen action plan. And these are under different sides of government. So a clear sign of the level of support from both sides of politics for hydrogen industry development, which we know is really very important when we're looking at long-term infrastructure investments and trading relationships when it comes to hydrogen export. The Hydrogen Action Plan has a vision and an objective. It also has a range of themes, if you like, of where we're focusing our action. And I guess it's really that those themes where we see the fourth and final reason that I'll talk to today is around a track record of delivering tangible actions on hydrogen. And so those areas really do focus on facilitating investments in hydrogen infrastructure, making sure that the regulatory environment is fit for purpose and world-class, deepening our trade relationships and supply chain capabilities, fostering innovation and workforce skills development, and integrating hydrogen into our energy system. One of the key things that we've been doing has been supporting the sort of, if you like, the first wave of green hydrogen projects. So the first of these is AGIG's HypeSA project. This is located at the Tonsley Innovation District, about 10 kilometres south of the Adelaide Central Business District. This project was officially launched last week by the Premier, as well as Dr. Finkel and the CEO of AGIG and the Minister for Energy and Mining. It has Australia's largest electrolyser at the moment at 1.25 megawatts. And the hydrogen being produced at that facility is being used to inject into the gas network and to supply industrial customers. It's a total project worth about $14.5 million in Australian, with a $4.9 million grant from the South Australian government. HDU are developing their Air Peninsula Gateway project. This project is currently in the front-end engineering design phase. It's looking at 75 megawatts worth of electrolysers to produce ammonia for both domestic users and to sort of activate export markets, and also involving hydrogen for peaking power generation. This is a $240 million project, and the South Australian government has provided a $4.7 million grant and a $7.5 million loan. And the other project that we've provided grant funding towards is Neoen's Hydrogen Super Hub. So this is targeting 50 megawatts of electrolysers. It's staged into a feasibility stage, and the second tier of support is for construction. And so there are opportunities for partnering in this particular project, and it is coming to the end of its feasibility phase at the moment. We've also been active in catalysing the next wave of projects. So we've had a very strong international engagement program. Both our Premier and Minister have visited Japan and or South Korea in recent, or both countries in the months prior to the COVID preventing international travel. We have got our trade office network, and so we have got our Sally Townsend and her team based across Tokyo and Seoul to provide a face for South Australia in both nations. As you'll hear about shortly, we've invested over $1.25 million Australian in developing a hydrogen export prospectus and an online modelling tool. So we officially released this in October last year. Very exciting pieces of work, and we've now got over 120 registered users from around the world using the online modelling tool. We've got a range of partnerships, again, looking at other feasibility or pre-feasibility studies. So we've got the Australian Hydrogen Centre, which is looking at greater use of hydrogen in the gas networks across South Australia and Victoria, where South Australia was a member of the Green Ammonia Consortium. And we also earlier this year announced an MOU with the Port of Rotterdam to study green hydrogen supply from South Australia to Europe. One project or initiative I wanted to make mention of was a strategic land release that was issued last week, which is for Port Bonython in the Spencer Gulf of South Australia. So this is a port location where the land and the infrastructure is owned by the South Australian government. There's over 2,000 hectares of available land made available through this strategic land release. The site has access to an existing deep water port with a 2.4 kilometre long jetty, which is currently undergoing a $37 million upgrade. The site's sort of right in the heart of our renewable energy hub zone or renewable energy zones, and it's already home to Santos's processing plant, which receives natural gas liquids and crude oil through a 659 kilometre pipeline from the Moomba Basin, again in the Cooper Basin in the northeast of the state. It's also home to a diesel fuel import and storage terminal. For anyone that is online that is interested, the EOI closes on the 29th, sorry, the expression of interest closes on the 29th of June 2021. and more information is available from the Tenders SA website, and I've shown the URL there at the bottom of the screen, so www.tenders.sa.gov.au. So that's all I had today. If you'd like any further information on either the action plan or the export modelling tool, the prospectus, any of the projects we're supporting, please go to www.hydrogen.sa.gov.au. And as I said, Rowan, very happy to make these slides available to those online today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard. And it's great to see the evolution of South Australia's energy renewable pipeline and some of the opportunities out there for our members and those in the industry to get involved with. So moving along now, I'd like to welcome the team from KPMG Australia who provide an overview of the hydrogen export modelling tool. So do we have the KPMG team here? Matt, welcome. Thank you very much.
Rowan, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's great to be here to talk to the two chambers, and congratulations also for bringing this together. And also thank you to Richard Day, who just provided a terrific overview of the South Australian energy transformation. The South Australian government, in our interactions with them, have been passionate, knowledgeable, and are dealing with many issues that are at the forefront of the energy transition. And they've been really great collaborators to work with over the past year as we've been working with them on the hydrogen export opportunity. So I am Matt Pearce. I'm the National Lead Partner for Power and Utilities for KPMG in Australia. And along with our Lead Energy Advisory Partner, Sabina Schleicher, we led the KPMG's delivery of the online modelling tool and the prospectus. And we worked with WSP, the global engineering services firm, to produce this piece of work. Today, I'm joined by key members of the KPMG team, specifically Katie Lutley, Jon Benton and Alastair Fraser. And Katie and Jon will in turn talk to some of the supply chain elements and the insights from our study. And then I will return to summarise. But in terms of the purpose of the tool, and if we could go to the next slide, thank you so much. The purpose of a study, but also the benefits of the study. And when I talk about the study, I talk about both the pre-feasibility study that we undertook to understand the supply chain, the configurations, and the export opportunity, and then the modelling tool, which captures all of that in an easy-to-use form, so potential investors and developers can understand the different economics of different project types. So when I talk about the study, I talk about both the technical pre-feasibility work and the tool itself. So the purpose of it, but also the benefits of this piece of work, is that the study and the tool does identify favourable locations and supply chain configurations for the export of hydrogen from South Australia. South Australia has 9 renewable energy zones. It has the Cooper and Otway gas basins. The renewable energy zones, as Richard rightly pointed out, have different resources in terms of solar and wind. And then we also overlay that with different port locations. And so this was a groundbreaking, first of its type study where we took all of those elements into account to say what are the more favourable locations for the establishment of industrial scale hydrogen supply chain. The second main benefit or purpose of the study is that the study does identify the major cost drivers for export costs and highlights areas of competitive strength for South Australia. And I think one of the questions was about the areas of strength for SA. We can talk about it briefly now, but perhaps we might do that more fully in the Q&A or the questions and answers. But in summary, the supply chain really for the industry's development, there are those characteristics which are specific to the state and those which are general. To get the cost of hydrogen export as low as possible and competitive as possible, those which are general are really about the deployment of technology making that as quick as possible, and the scale of the plant, and making that as large as possible. They are simply generic factors that go into the economics of hydrogen export. Those which are really location dependent, regionally or opportunity dependent, are, for example, the costs of electricity, the transport costs, the capacity factors or the infrastructure utilization, and then the port costs. And for those, we have not done a comparative study, but it is very clear from what Richard was putting forward that South Australia has very strong, world-class renewable energy resources. And our finding was that those resources are located very close to favourable port locations. Thirdly, our study highlights avenues for intervention to improve project economics. And that might be identifying areas that project proponents could target in order to improve their economics, for example, adjacent offtakes or multi-user infrastructure, or also highlighting opportunities for government to consider initiatives or support, for example, on the development planning. And Richard has talked about the expression of interest for the Port Bonython region. And then fourthly, the tool allows investors to input their own assumptions and consider the outputs, potentially supporting investment design and shortlisting. So it should be, and that will provide indicative FOB or free on board costs for the export hydrogen. So the model will not replace the need for individual investors and projects to undertake their own investigations, but it will enable all investors to narrow down their thinking very quickly, and it will enable them to understand where are the opportunities in South Australia. So our study focused on the export to Asia. We've identified 4 countries primarily for this: Japan, South Korea, China, and Singapore. We have estimated an export volume. Our baseline, our base case estimate of export volumes was for South Australia up to 250,000 tonnes per annum has been assumed. The tool does enable the increasing or reduction in the volumes. We made those assumptions because we assumed that there would be a number of export locations from Australia. South Australia might be one of a few. And so with that, we might now turn to the next slide, which is around the actual supply chain analysis itself. My colleague, Katie Lutley, will take us through this. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, Matt. So the development of the tool included 3 key steps: supply chain analysis, the pre-feasibility model, and the development of the tool itself. And the core analysis was focused across the supply chain on elements which are specific to South Australia, so energy source and export location. And the purpose of this analysis was to allow for some pre-optimization, given the complexity and the number of potential options, to make the online tool more manageable and user-friendly. The analysis identified the following results, and this is shown from left to right on the diagram in front of you. From a renewable resource perspective, wind capacity factors of up to 53%, complemented by solar within the Upper Spencer Gulf and the Eyre Peninsula, were identified as the most favourable locations, each of these regions offering around 10 gigawatts of wind capacity. It was found that oversizing the renewable resource versus the downstream load requirements was beneficial, with a ratio of approximately 2:1 of renewable capacity to downstream capacity. For blue hydrogen production, 2 feedstock and 2 CCS options were identified. These are in the Cooper Basin or leveraging existing gas pipeline infrastructure. For sequestration of carbon dioxide, the Otway Basin or the Cooper Basin. For green transport, electricity transmission was identified as the lowest cost, with the electrolyser located at the port. And for conversion, 3 main hydrogen products were analysed. Liquid organic hydrogen carriers and ammonia were found to offer the lowest FOB cost. In terms of port screening, a detailed assessment was undertaken to identify the potential favourable ports for export, and 5 were identified as favourable, as shown in the diagram. Whilst the analysis considered overall export demand, demand by end-use product volumes was not included, and therefore end market conversion as well as shipping needs would need to be considered by end users. And if we move on to the following slide, Alistair. The outputs of the supply chain were incorporated into the pre-feasibility model, and this forms the basis of the online tool. The model ran several thousand scenarios to identify the most favourable potential supply chain configurations, i.e. those with the lowest free on board cost outcomes. And there are a number of configurations which can be created within the online tool. Here we have presented 4 representative configurations, and this is to give an idea of what the industry could look like. These configurations are presented in the prospectus with further details. As mentioned, these are examples only, and there may be other feasible supply chain configurations. The 4 which we've represented on the page assume export in 2030 and include 2 large-scale green hydrogen configurations. These assume export volumes of up to 250,000 tonnes per year. As Matt noted, export volumes within the tool are capped at 250,000 tonnes per year. And these options include either export from Port Bonython using renewables from the Upper Spencer Gulf, or export from Cape Hardy or Port Spencer using renewables from the Eyre Peninsula. Both of these configurations assume transmission distances of less than 70 kilometres to the port. We've shown one large-scale blue hydrogen configuration, and this uses gas reserves in the Cooper Basin at Moomba, exporting from Port Bonython, again assuming volumes of up to 250,000 tonnes per year. We've also shown one smaller scale green hydrogen configuration using the existing infrastructure and grid-connected renewable energy via PPAs with export from Port Adelaide, and here volumes are assumed to be up to 80,000 tonnes per year. We note that you could also have smaller scale blue hydrogen configurations from Adelaide, leveraging the existing infrastructure. So I'll hand over to Jon Benton to step through the cost outcomes of the analysis.
Thanks, Katie. So we'll now start looking at the results. So one of the key findings of the study is that the proportion of costs that are driven by South Australia's geographical characteristics represent around 50 to 55% of the total FOB cost stack. So these are the things that are currently highlighted in the green and blue. And this is based on on an ammonia production, but is similar for other end-use products. We also note that energy costs have been excluded from the production and downstream processing cost components presented here to draw out the electrical costs as one component. The key locational costs include energy, accounting for between 35 to 50%. So as discussed, South Australia has expansive areas to harness world-class wind and solar resources. Through the optimization, we've been able to achieve higher electrolyzer utilization of up to around 70%, with about 10 to 15% of constrained electrical resources based on the 2-to-1 ratio of renewables to electrical capacity that Katie noted. The region also has significant gas reserves, as mentioned, and suitable CCS storage locations. From the port perspective, the costs are a relatively small contributor to overall FOB costs, around 5%. And it's noted that South Australia has existing ports and greenfield opportunities which lend themselves to be developed into an export port, as noted through Richard's comment around Port Bonython and the terminal there. In addition to the geographic characteristics, we looked at different technology opportunities, and these are the half of the cost. So the remaining 50% associated with production and conversion to shippable products are largely independent of location and are a function of global technology costs and how quickly the industry will scale up and realize cost reductions. The tool assumes a 2030 or 2027 delivery start year, and we've assumed a cost reduction of up to 50% by 2030 for electrolyzers based on global change. It is fair to say, however, that there is currently significant uncertainty as to how quickly the industry will scale up and how quickly cost reductions for green hydrogen will come down. The relative maturity of blue hydrogen, particularly steam methane reforming in the case of our study, means that we assumed limited cost reduction for blue hydrogen production through to 2030 in the absence of any technology change. From a production perspective, the study looked at sort of PEM electrolysis and steam methane reforming, but we know that there are other technologies available. Thanks, Alistair. The next slide's fine. So the study provides the individual components of the cost stack to get to FOB, and the price range captures the three products we have analysed: ammonia, liquid hydrogen, and liquid organic hydrogen carriers. We know that the energy costs are presented here, contrary to the previous slide, within the relevant supply chain components where energy is consumed. Based on that, and you can see from the charts, the average production costs across the four favourable configurations were around $2.50 for blue hydrogen and $3.50 for green hydrogen based on the 2030 start date. The downstream processing category reflects the cost assumptions for all three products and as a result gives a large range, with the liquid organic hydrogen carriers and ammonia being at the lower end of the range and liquefaction at the higher end of the range. We'll now move on to the tool itself. So the South Australian Hydrogen Modelling Tool is designed to support the development of the hydrogen industry in South Australia, as noted by Matt at the start of this conversation. It has been built to allow select parties who have a genuine hydrogen development interest in the state to assess potential hydrogen export supply chain configurations for various types of hydrogen export products and identify the indicative free on-board costs. The tool focuses on export supply chain configurations and includes options to select inputs for the export terminal, product types, and the volume, as well as how the hydrogen is produced. So you can see on the left-hand side that there is a number of different decisions that users will be asked to make. And they're asked to start with the different demand volumes and the product type. And then there are key questions which are sort of down-selected and narrowed down based on the optimization work that has been done. So this will lead users to identify the favorable locations based on their selections and configurations. The tool has a number of open access features that anyone can use if they visit the site, with the supply chain analysis available by request to the Department of Energy and Mining via hydrogen@sa.gov.au. There is an instructional video available on the website, which the department has made available, and we would recommend anyone who wants to use the tool take a look at that video and carefully examine the assumptions booklet available within the printouts. I would invite you all to take a look at the tool and explore the video. I'll now hand back to Matt.
Thanks so much, John. And that video is definitely worth a look in terms of giving an overview of the tool, how to use it, but then also some of the reports that are produced from the tool. So in summary, this tool does provide an indicative assessment of the potential opportunities for export hydrogen in South Australia. The tool is informed by a detailed pre-feasibility study, which was commissioned by the Department for Energy and Mining in 2020 on behalf of the Government of South Australia. Invited parties can explore indicative range of FOB prices from the down-selected ports. It is a very good starting point for examining opportunities. Secondly, the prospectus itself provides that good starting point. But thirdly, I'd say that we do see synergies between a domestic and an export market in the development of the hydrogen economy. South Australia has just commissioned Australia's first and largest hydrogen electrolyser. That hydrogen electrolyser is blending into the domestic gas network. We see opportunities for the decarbonisation of heavy fleet, in industry, heavy industry, the coupling of export supply chains with those domestic purposes will encourage the economics of hydrogen to become increasingly competitive at a faster rate. So with that, thank you very much for the opportunity to present our online modelling tool and hydrogen export study. And yeah, back to you, Rowan.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank everyone from KPMG Australia, especially Matt, Katie and John, who presented today. The hydrogen export modelling tool is a fantastic tool for those interested in investing in South Australia, and we look forward to exploring its features in the near future. Now, to get a better understanding of some of the other investment opportunities in South Australia, I'd like to now welcome Edith Mucsi, the Business Development Manager for the Department of Trade and Investment.
Good morning, good afternoon and good evening for the audience, because I'm aware that we have audience from all over the world. Just received a couple of messages even from the US. So good morning, good afternoon and good evening. Thank you very much for AustCham Korea and Australia and New Zealand Chamber of Commerce Japan for organizing this event. I'm very glad that we can be here and we can promote what we have done in South Australia and what our vision and what our plans for the future. Thanks to Richard, Matt and KPMG, I think we could message a very comprehensive information to the audience, what we have done, how the clean energy transition happened in the last, let's say, 15 years in Australia, and what we can do with the generated renewable electricity. Richard highlighted that we are absolutely we have absolutely a rich history of advancing new energy technologies. We are close to 70% of the state's energy requirements supported by green renewable technologies. We have a supportive and positive energy policy and targets for net 100% renewable energy generation by 2050. And all in all, the very important statement is that we have, South Australia has the capability to produce green hydrogen at rates competitive with the lowest global estimates. But all the other things that we have the land, we have the sun, we have the wind, we still have more reasons why South Australia is an ideal location to invest. So just a very quick overview about South Australia. On the left-hand side, of course, we have invariable lifestyle and low cost of living. We are competitive. We can offer competitive business environment, low cost tax favorable environment. Very important that we have skilled and educated workforce. Our universities are world-leading ones. Our land, industrial sites, and strategic, which are in the strategic central location, is feasible in reasonable price. We are really thriving modern manufacturing ecosystem. We have world-class high-tech capabilities, artificial intelligence, and data analytics, and we are centrally located, so we are globally connected. So we can use our strengths, and using these strengths, building the future, which definitely will lead us to growth. So the state is ready to make the most of the opportunities to expand hydrogen use domestically and for export market. And when we are having a chat with investors and companies, we clearly see that investment always needs a business case and enables. Richard and Matt and KPMG showcased and verified that we have the solar resources, we have the wind resources, we have available land, and of course workforce and policy regulation right in place. With KPMG developed and WSP developed a tool, our investors are able to model their own scenarios, which is important because there's no one solution fits to all, but this hydrogen export modeling tool and the prospectus try to answer questions, individual questions for all users. But we still have more opportunities to collaborate. So we have research collaboration opportunities. For example, one of the most significant one is, or the two of the most significant one is the CRCs, the heavy industries low carbon transition CRC and the hydrogen CRC. Both CRC are led by University of Adelaide, while the heavy industry low carbon transition CRC focuses on really developing technologies and methods which overcomes barrier to the low carbon transition, and it still accepts new member. While the hydrogen CRC is a brand new CRC just being shaped and open for membership inquiries. I added to website link and email address for contacting Michael or Greg for the hydrogen CRC, and my presentation will be distributed, I assume, so please feel free to contact the gentlemen. I also like to showcase the hydrogen cluster. This cluster is funded by federal government from NERA and also open for membership inquiries. The cluster is really help you to develop business case with other members, position yourself within the supply chain, or helps you really to build a market scale via the domestic and export scales channels. So this is also a networking opportunity. But our department, the Trade and Investment, has a designated website for projects which are in a major position, which is open for investors. Investors who seeking offtake opportunities, even for renewable energy under power purchase agreement, or even for equity investment in ongoing hydrogen projects or future projects. Please feel free to visit the website, and if you need any further information on the project you can find, just drop me a line or contact me. The last thing I like to highlight is the industry capability network. This is, let's say, in a funny way, so-called dating service. So our department offers every international and national project developers to find the capability, the local capability, which means that the ICM is operating, let's say, and managing a database, and this database is really a pivotal link between major projects and international and national stakeholders, and of course Australian suppliers. The ICN is across Australia, so it's not just South Australia, it's across Australia, and more than 70,000 company listings are available. Billions of dollars for projects seeking expression of interest. Work packages are launched, and you can also seek capabilities when you are in short or you are developing your project. Feel free really to reach out to our ICN SA team on info@icnsa.org.au, but also please feel free to contact me if you have any other questions. We are very lucky because we have overseas offices also in Seoul and in Tokyo. Feel free to contact Sally Townsend, the Regional Director for Japan and Korea, or MJ in our Korea Seoul offices, or as just repeating myself, or contact me anytime if you need any further information.
Thank you very much, Edith. It's a pleasure, and thank you very much for highlighting some of the investment opportunities. Can you economically produce solar in the desert and transmit either to load centers or to H2 electrolyzer facilities at scale? And if so, when can you expect this to be achievable? Is anyone out there would like to take that question?
I'm wondering if one of the KPMG team would like to take that one, perhaps.
I was on mute. Thank you very much. So what we found is that, yes, absolutely, there are solar arrays already, utility scale solar installations in broad acres, in remote areas, connected to the grid by transmission capacity, by transmission lines. What we found is that it is most economic to have electricity transmission connection to an electrolyzer which is based near the port location, as opposed to make, as opposed to producing the hydrogen and carrying it via either as liquid organic hydrogen, ammonia, or all other types of hydrogen forms or vectors. So transmission capacity is very important, and it is something that is within our scope.
Fantastic. I've got a question here from Aaron Deans, and this might have been touched on a little bit before. How much renewable energy generation is expected to underpin the first exports of green hydrogen?
At scale. So we factored in, I might get Jon Benton. John actually has a PhD in hydrogen and remembers all the numbers off the top of his head. So I might get my colleague Jon Benton to do it. But essentially, we found that the renewable energy resource should be factored to twice the size of the electrolyser in order to get the best capacity factors. But John, did you want to talk about the specific volumes?
Yeah, so from an export perspective, we looked at between 10,000 and 250,000 tonnes per annum within South Australia, noting that there does need to be a level of scale to achieve sort of the cost requirements and to actually allow export. From a electrolyzer capacity, that ranges from sort of between the 50 megawatts up to around sort of a gigawatt, a gig and a half watt. So you're talking sort of double that for renewable capacity. So around 100 megawatts to almost 3 gigawatts of renewable capacity that's sort of required. So we expect it to scale. And that's also why we looked at grid connected options as well, as we think the early projects will likely be grid connected.
Fantastic, thank you. From Jun Ho, would the South Australian government be considering setting a target for renewable gas mirroring renewable energy targets to accelerate the deployment of green hydrogen blending in existing or future gas networks?
I can probably take that one. And thank you for the question, June, and great to hear that you're online. Look, in terms of a sort of a renewable gas target, I think I'd probably say that the state's probably starting point and a preference would be for a national approach, a bit like we had with the mandatory renewable energy target sort of back in the early 2000s. But I think in terms of mechanisms to support the greater use of hydrogen in the gas network, I think we're certainly open to conversations about what could be done at the state level. Obviously, we're supporting AGIG's HyperSA project, which is injecting hydrogen gas now into the gas network as of last week, supplying 700 customers are now in South Australia receiving a 5% renewable hydrogen and gas blend. And we're also working closely with AGIG on looking at sort of feasibility studies for use of hydrogen in a much larger part of the gas network, and then all of South Australia. So we're certainly, working closely there. I probably would just add, I do reflect on how renewable electricity policy really started in Australia, and that was really back in the late 1990s with the Green Power Scheme. So that was basically, it's an independent quality assurance scheme of electricity retail products that was administered by the states that really started to enable the voluntary purchase of green electricity by consumers. And that was really a precursor to going to a mandatory scheme.
Thank you, Richard. And just conscious of time, one more question from Marie Pavlik. Is there a carbon capture considered in the cost of blue hydrogen? Regardless, what is the estimated proportional cost to the $2.50?
Yes, is the answer. The blue hydrogen did have carbon capture and storage factored into it. The specific cost, if I remember correctly, was it, John, was it $30 a tonne that we assumed?
It was between $10 and $20 per tonne, and so it was pretty minimal in terms of the impact.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much. Now I'm just going to hand it over and wrapping up today's event, to introduce Sally Townsend, who's the South Australian Commissioner to Japan and South Korea, and also the chairperson of the ANZCCJ. Sally, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome.
Thank you, Rowan, and thank you so much to the South Australian crew and KPMG, and of course the two chambers for putting this on. It's terrific that we can work together in not only decarbonising the world, but also working together as two chambers in this part of Asia. So thank you very much, and it's terrific to see so many people have joined. I think we had almost 100 people at one point join this session, so that's great to see. And as Rowan introduced, I am the Regional Director for South Australia in the area, and I'm supported by Myung-Jin Kim in Seoul. So she's on the line too, I can see. So if anyone has any questions on the AustCham side, they're very welcome to go through Rowan through to MJ as well. This is also a terrific starting point for us at the Australian-New Zealand Chamber of Commerce here. Emily, our Executive Director, and Akihiro Ito are online as well. We have just started a sustainability committee in line with, I believe, what AustCham is doing as well. And we can say this is probably our first event to kick that off. So more information about that event and, sorry, about that committee when our first committee meeting will be, and the team who will lead that will be up online soon. So thank you again, everyone, for your time, and for those who tuned in to watch, it's been very educational and great to see South Australia being so well represented. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. And just wrapping up today, I'd like to thank everyone who participated today, our attendees, Richard Day, the KPMG team, Edit, Mucsi, and obviously Sally. Thank you very much for all participating in today. It's great to promote the opportunities in South Australia. Just a quick reminder for everyone out there that both chambers are the peak body representing the business community in our markets. And I do recommend that you do reach out, especially with the formation of the committee. As Sally mentioned, these committees and the chambers are here to connect businesses to businesses, but also connect businesses to government. And, as we have seen today, so it's a fantastic opportunity to get involved. So if you have any questions, please be sure to contact myself or Emily at the ANZCCJ. And I look forward to speaking to you soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you.